What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another retro Yu-Gi-Oh format video. And in this video, I'm going to be showing off the first duel on the channel in jar format, which is the format that I just released a guide for yesterday. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. But basically, jar format is treasure format, but with the introduction of Tournament Pack 2, and more importantly, with the introduction of Morphing Jar at 3 copies, which kind of warps the format a little bit, because Mill becomes a much better deck than it was in Treasure format. Having another monster to recur with things like Spear Cretin that can also draw your opponent deeper into their deck and thus deplete them of cards sooner is just very powerful. So Morphing Jar makes this deck pretty insane, which we might see in the duels that I've got for you today. But before we dive into the deck breakdown and the duels here, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe. We're trying to reach 500 subscribers by the end of February, and, maybe we won't reach that goal because we're around like 425 last I checked. But, I'm still going to reach for that goal. I'm still going to hope for it. And if you're not already subscribed, you can help us reach that goal by subscribing. In addition, we have a Discord server now. Link will be in the description down below. But it's a great place to find games in these obscure formats that aren't really played anywhere else. So definitely check it out if you're interested. And lastly, if you enjoy the video, as always, please do leave a like down below. But with all that out of the way, let's dive into this mill deck. So, it's basically the same as it was in Treasure format, except with the addition of Morphing Jars. So, the monster lineup is relatively the same. We've got the 2 Sangan, 2 Witch, because they can search out everything in our deck. We've got the 2 Spear Cretin, because they can recycle our powerful flip monsters, like Man-Eater Bug if we need removal, Magician of Faith if we need to get back a spell, like Card Destruction if we're making a big mill play, or just one of our power spells. 3 Heroes Shadow Scout, because it is still a pretty good mill card in this format, and, it doesn't let your opponent get the power spells, which is pretty nice. We've got a Cyber Jar, which can be insane when paired with Card Destructions, and is also a great board removal. And we've also got the new 3 Morphing Jars. Morphing Jars are pretty crazy, as this can both, get your opponent deeper into the deck and also provide you with more resources. So it's an incredibly good card just in general, but in the mill deck it especially shines. Moving on to the spells, we've of course got the 2 Card Destruction. This is your main win condition. The goal of the deck is sort of to deplete your opponent's deck down to a low enough size with things like Morphing Jars, Hero Shadow Scout, etc. And then to pull off a big card destruction play using things like Giant Trunade to fill up your opponent's hand with their back row, or Cyber Jar to get them up to a major hand size and just go for card destruction or double card destruction to kill them out of nowhere. So these card destructions are very important. We've also got some powerful limited spells like Change of Heart, which is actually, I think, a new inclusion. I don't think I was playing this in the treasure version of the deck, but it's very good here, as you are likely to be facing a sort of mill mirror match, and this is incredibly good in the mirror match, just being able to take your opponent's mill monsters as well, or being able to take something like a Magician of Faith. So Change of Heart is very useful here. And also occasionally you do have to win through damage with this deck, so it can be very good in that regard as well. We've also got Dark Hole and Raigeki and Pot of Greed. Of course, these cards are just insane in pretty much every deck. We've got 2 hand rips in the form of Confiscation and Forceful Sentry. We're not really playing Delinquent Duo because it deprives them of 2 cards in hand, which can conflict with our card destruction plays. And while both of these cards do sort of weaken our opponent's hand size, for if we want to do a card destruction play, they do give us hand knowledge, and they also let us snipe a powerful sort of spell and trap removal if we need that, or monster removal if we need that. It's just very good to know what your opponent's on, so you can sort of play around it. For the other spells, we've got 3 Giant Trunade. As I said, this can be great at bouncing cards back to your opponent's hand for a big card destruction play, and it has other applications as well. For instance, bouncing back your own Swords Revealing Light to get more value off of these. These are very good in general here at just stalling your opponent out so you can buy time to sort of set up your mill combos and mill them out. For the traps, we've got 3 Magic Jammer, which is very good at stopping things like Raigeki, Dark Hole, or like Heavy Storm and stuff like that. This can be very, very good for the deck, so that's why we're at 3 copies. And can also be very good even if you're at very low resources, because things like Morphing Jar and Cyber Jar can sort of get you back resources to discard off the Magic Jammer. We've also got a Mirror Force, so this is insane if you're able to pull it off. And we've got 3 Waboku, as this is a deck that you're trying to stall your opponent with, And this can be very good to chain off of something like a Heavy Storm or a Giant Tornado if you think your opponent's going to go for a major offensive push. For the side deck, we've got 2 Heavy Storm, 3 Mystical Space Typhoon. These are mainly here for the burn matchup. If you think that your opponents on burn are going to side into burn, then these can be very good to bring in to deal with things like Chain Energy or just Desserts and the like. We have one Painful Choice, as, you know, this isn't really that good in the main deck anymore, given that Mill is such a prevalent deck, and if you do face an opponent's Mill deck, then sending 5 cards from your deck to the graveyard can be really bad. This is mainly to bring in if your opponent isn't on the Mill matchup, as it can be very good in pretty much every other case. We've got 3 Tribute to the Doomed for the Mill Mirror match, as this can be very strong at sniping your opponent's sets. We've got 3 7 Tools of the Bandit, in case our opponent is on a bit more of a counter trap heavy strategy. And we've got 3 Solemn Judgment if we're not going up against Burn. So all in all, I think this is one of the best decks in the format, and it's the best Mill has looked in a long time. So let's dive into a duel to show off what I mean. Okay, we've got a game against Ratos here. We're playing Mill, unclear what they're playing. But, you know, let's find out. Let's do the rock, paper, scissors. Unfortunately, they do win the rock, paper, scissors. So we will be going first here. Or no, we'll be going second here, not first. They'll be going first here. This is a pretty bad hand, honestly, to open. And it gets even worse when they've got a Forceful Sentry here. They're going to take our Man-Eater Bug, which is quite unfortunate. So that'll get sent back to the deck. And they're just going to set 2, pass back to us. We draw Cyberjar, which is pretty good. We'll set that. And we're going to set the 2 card destructions and a Magic Jammer here, figuring that if they've got some form of spell and trap removal, like a Heavy Storm or something, we can Magic Jammer, discarding the Confiscation. Since, you know, they did know that we had the Confiscation, they must not have anything too good in hand to send off of it yet. So, you know, if they don't have spell and trap removal, then we could potentially save this for after our Cyberjar activation. So we feel pretty safe doing this. And they're going to activate Mystical Space Typhoon, targeting one of our card destructions. Given that they're opening with the Mystical Space Typhoon, we figure that, you know, they likely don't have like a Heavy Storm or something, or they don't want to activate a Heavy Storm here. So we're actually going to Magic Jammer, discarding the Confiscation. And unfortunately, we do get a bit outplayed here because they do indeed have the Heavy Storm set. So that will destroy both of our card destructions there. They're going to flip up a Man-Eater Bug, pop our Cyberjar, and we've got no resources now. So, you know, kind of an unfortunate start for us, but hopefully we can draw something good here. We draw a Hero Shadow Scale, which isn't the best, but, you know, it at least mills them a little bit, deprives them of powerful spells potentially, and it also serves as like a blocker for one of their attacks, so that's pretty nice. Unfortunately, they do have a Change of Heart, and so they'll be able to get really aggressive here, attacking in for 3250. And this is just quite unfortunate. We will get Hero's Shadow Scope back. We draw Pot of Greed, which could help us out of this mess. We're going to activate the Pot of Greed. Unfortunately, they do have a Solemn Judgment for that, so we won't be able to activate that. We could flip up the Hero's Shadow Scout and attack over the Man-Eater Bug, but honestly, at this point, that will probably harm us more than help us, as if they get another monster to hand, then that'll basically defeat the point of doing that. So they're just going to attack in with the Mystic Tomato. You know, they will mill the Pot of Greed and the Mystical Space Typhoon here, which is pretty nice, but they will grab a Sandgam, which is quite unfortunate. There's not really many good ways out of this for us, so we just gotta hope we get something good here, but I don't think it's very likely. They're going to set 1, and we draw Magician of Faith, which won't do it, and that will be the end of the game. So you may be watching that and wondering, like, well, why are you hyping up the mill deck? That was pretty bad there. And to be fair, we did open a pretty bad hand with just 2 card destruction in the opener. You don't really want to draw those early, you want to draw those later. But I'd also argue that our opponent got extremely lucky there with their draws and stuff, and they did outplay us a bit. If we hadn't taken the bait on the Mystical Space Typhoon, maybe we would have been a bit better off, as, you know, we would have been able to retain 1 card destruction and potentially draw deeper into our deck for a better card. But, you know, I just think we got majorly outplayed there, and our opponent did draw pretty well to get very aggressive early on. So, we know that they're not on burn here, so we're actually going to side into some Solemn Judgments, because we figure that that's a very good card, and we did see that they were on Solemns of their own, so we figure this would be good to counteract that. So, we don't know exactly what they'll side into here, but we figure that we've got a pretty good shot if they keep it on, like, the good stuff aggro deck here, even though we did lose in game 1. We draw 2 Sangans in the opener, which is pretty nice. We'll set 1, pass back to them by setting a Waboku there. We don't want to commit too much to back row here in case they've got like another heavy storm. So Waboku is a good chainable trap to set. They're just going to set a bunch and pass back to us. We figure that this means that they likely have like a morphing jar or something. So we're going to flip up the Sangan, set the other Sangan in our hand, and then set our entire hand just in case it is a morphing jar. So we'll hit into the germ here, and unfortunately it is a germ and not a morphing jar. So it looks like they've sided in potentially into burn, which is a bit worrying as Mill has a bit of trouble against burn decks. And we did not side appropriately for facing a burn deck here. They're going to set one and attack in to our Sangan with the giant germ. So we will take 500 and we will add a witch to hand. They're also going to attack into our Sangan here to give us another monster. So we're going to add a Cyber Jar as that is good board removal here. And it does sort of aid our mill strategy. We draw Magician of Faith, which is pretty good. We're going to try Dark Holing the board just in case that set monster is something good. And they do have a Solemn here, so they will be able to negate that. So we're just going to set the Magician of Faith to hopefully get back the Dark Hole next turn. They're going to flip up Princess Tsurugi, which is pretty brutal here. This will deal 2,000 damage to us because we were trying to play around a Morphing Jar that they didn't have, unfortunately. And it looks like they drew Raigeki to attack over the Magician of Faith. We're going to Mirror Force that board away as we don't really want to take 1,900 points of damage. And, you know, we can just get aggressive here ourselves. We'll bring out Witch and just try attacking in. They're already at 4,000. We could potentially win this game through damage here. And against a burn deck, you kind of have to pivot strategies into a more burn strategy of your own, as your opponent is likely playing Minars, and they will be able to probably kill you with burn if you give them time. They're going to set one, pass back to us. We draw swords, which is pretty decent. And we're going to actually think about what to do here. We're going to set the Cyber Jar and just attack into their set. This is just sort of play around Morphing Jar a little bit. And, I mean, I guess we should have set the swords if we were playing around Morphing Jar. So maybe this is a bit of a mistake. But, unfortunately, it isn't Morphing Jar, it's just Man-Eater Bug. So we do lose a very powerful monster there. And we're just going to keep the swords in hand. They're going to bring out a Witch, and they're going to Change of Heart our Witch. So this could be pretty brutal if it actually connects, but luckily we've got the Waboku here. They're going to give us back the Witch. We draw Solemn, which is not the best here because we don't really want to be using Solemns as that gets us down very low in life points. We're going to activate this Swords, set the Solemn, switch the Witch to defense, and pass back to them. Just going on the defensive here. They're going to activate Dark Hole, and we could Solemn this if we wanted to, as Spear Cretin can be very powerful. Getting back like the Magician of Faith could be very nice. But they could get back like a Princess of Tsurugi in response, so, you know, we'll just let that go through, as we do get a search off the Witch here anyways. They're going to add a Witch of their own, and we are going to think about what to add here. We're going to actually add a Morphing Jar, as we are at pretty low resources. They're going to set 2, pass back to us. We draw Change of Heart, which could be pretty nice at getting aggressive. We're going to set the Morphing Jar, pass back to them. And they're going to pass back to us. We draw Pot of Greed as well. We're going to activate that now, and maybe this is a little bit of a misplay, but, I mean, I think it's fine. We're doing it so that way if we get a monster, we can potentially go for a lot of damage here. And we don't have to flip the Morphing Jar up yet. We don't necessarily draw anything too good here, but we are going to Trunade to get back these swords to hand. They're going to chain Desserts, so unfortunately we will take 500 there, but that's not as bad as Desserts as it could have been. We are just going to try flipping up the Morphing Jar here and drawing a better monster because we want to just get aggressive if we can. We know that that's a Witch set there, so if we draw like a Witch of our own, then we can get in for a ton of damage here. So unfortunately they do have a Minar in hand. So we will take that 1,000, but we do discard off a Heavy Storm, which is extremely nice to see. We're going to take 1,000 there, and we're going to Change of Heart their Witch, flip it up, and just attack in for 1,800. We could have gotten more aggressive here, summoning out the Morphing Jar and attacking in for 2,500, but the way we figure it is if we set the Witch here, or not the Witch, the Magician of Faith here, we can get back the Change of Heart again, which should be good enough. So we're going to set the Magician, activate the swords again. They've got Heavy Storm. We're going to Magic Jammer that, discarding a Waboku because we've got another in hand. They're going to set a bunch and pass back to us. We draw a Solemn Judgment here. And we got to think about exactly what to do here. We're going to try and Trinade to start, just in case they've got something to stop our play. They've got a Just Desserts, and they've got a Mystical Space Typhoon, so they will be able to hit our Magic Jammer, which is a little bit unfortunate, but not the worst thing in the world. And we are going to activate Swords first, just in case it's a Morphing Jar. We don't want to get whatever we get back with the Magician to get discard off the Morphing Jar. But we misplay this a little bit because we could have flipped up the Magician first, then set whatever we got back, and then activated the Swords, just in case it's something like a Man-Eater bug. And it is indeed a Man-Eater bug, so we won't be able to actually go for game here, which could be a very deadly mistake. We're going to set the Morphing Jar of our own and set 3, pass back to them. And we're in pretty bad territory here. They're going to Tribute to the Doomed, and we could potentially Solemn that, and we will indeed Solemn that, as we do want to sort of draw into something that can let us win the game here. They're going to activate Chain Energy, which is a bit worrying, and pass back to us. We're going to just Morphing Jar. No need to commit the heroes to board, as that will just cost us 500 damage that we don't really want to take. And we draw a Card Destruction, which could draw us deeper into our deck, potentially, to draw something that could win here. Unfortunately, if we do commit the Card Destruction to board, and if they've got a Minar, then we just lose the game. So we're not going to do that. We're just going to set the Man-Eater bug. We know that they've used up a Raigeki and a Dark Hole, so we're fine with this. If they change of heart, that's costing them 500 and it doesn't actually win them the game here. So I think we're overall pretty fine. We're going to switch the Morphing Jar that we've already brought out to attack in defense, because that way, you know, if they do have a way to clear the Swords, they can't get too aggressive here. Looks like they're just going to set 1, and that should be the end of the game. We're going to flip up the Man-Eater bug, pop that Witch. They will get a search here, but it won't matter in the end, as we do have Solemn for whatever their last back row is. And we'll attack indirectly. They've got Just Desserts, but we've got Solemn, so that will be the end of the game. So we were able to win against a Burn side deck, which, you know, I think shows how when you're siding into Burn, the deck is a little bit less competent against Mill than it is when you're just starting with Burn already. And so we were able to sort of eke out a win there. So hopefully we can do that in Game 3. And we should be likely able to, as, you know, we're able to side in Spawn Trap removal here. So we side out the Solemns, we bring in some Heavy Storms, we bring in some Mystical Space Typhoons. Pretty sure we side out the Magic Jammers as well, because they're a lot less useful in the matchup. And we hope that those will all be enough. As, you know, Burn decks do rely on things like Chain Energy, which can be destroyed with the Mystical Space Typhoons and Heavy Storms and the like. So we're feeling pretty decent about our odds here. Unfortunately, we don't draw any Spawn Trap removal in the opener here, and they're going to open up with a Chain Energy. That's a bit bad for us. We don't want them to have that early, as it does just get us down a lot of life points early. But we're going to try and potentially draw into Spawn Trap removal by setting our Morphing Jar here first, passing back to them. And unfortunately, they do have a Raigeki here, so they will be able to clear the Morphing Jar. They're going to flip up the Witch of the Black Forest and attack in for 11. Pass back to us. We draw Pot of Greed, and I think we are just going to go for it to try and just draw into Spawn Trap removal. We've got a ton of Spawn Trap removal in our deck, 8 cards. So if we draw any of it, I feel like we'll be pretty fine. We draw Card Destruction, which is okay, but not the best here. But it can be very good if we get like a Giant Trinade. So we're just going to set the Sandgan here, thin out our deck a little bit, or at least attempt to. They're going to Change of Heart, flip up the Sandgan, and try attacking in for 2100. We can't let that go through, so we'll activate Wuboku. They're going to Forceful Sentry to snipe something out of our hand here. And they're going to take one of our Sandgans, and that will go back into the deck. And that's quite unfortunate, as that would have been a very good defensive tool and enabled us to deck thin a little bit more. They're going to set one more monster of their own, and we draw another Card Destruction, which is okay. We could potentially commit it to board, but we don't really want to do that yet. We're going to set this Hero Shadow Scout. They're going to switch both their monsters to attack. They'll attack into the Sandgan, and we will get a search off the Sandgan, so we'll grab a Cyber Jar, as that can draw us deeper into the deck and clear their board at the same time. And they get a Cannon Soldier off the Hero Shadow Scout. They get Cannon Soldier and Just Desserts, and we're at 4,400 with Chain Energy up on field. This is not looking good for us. That might just be the end of the game here, potentially. Yeah, this is really bad. They're going to set a ton, and they'll pay 1,500, but honestly, that's fine for them, as we don't really have anything that can do anything against this board. We might just want to fire the card destruction now, just to like try and draw something that can help us here. But we're going to take a risk and just set the Cyberjar, hoping that they maybe set the Cannon Soldier instead of the Man-Eater Bug. As, you know, if they set the Man-Eater Bug, we just lose the game. But I figure this is a hopefully safer play than just card destruction for, like, board removal, as that will drop us down really low, and if they do have Menars, then we just lose the game that way. Unfortunately, they did make the disciplined play here, and they did set the Man-Eater Bug, so that will just be the end of the game. So, you know, you may be seeing that game and being like, I thought you said that Mill was like one of the best decks in the format. It lost pretty handily to a good stuff aggro list here. And yes, that is true, but I think that the good stuff aggro list opened very well in game 1, and we opened pretty poorly game 1, which can happen. You know, any deck can beat any other deck if it is able to draw the right cards and play them well, and Aratus is a very good player, so they did play those cards well. But we played a rematch sort of right after this just to see how the games would go if it wasn't such a blowout in turn 1. So let's see how that goes. Okay, we've got a rematch against Aratos here. They're on the same deck that they were on, and we are on our sort of mill deck here. So they will be going second here as we do win the rock, paper, scissors. And this is a much better opener here, especially with the Forceful Sentry. We can activate that right away, see what they've got. And this is a pretty good one. They've got Dark Hole, Man-Eater Bug, Giant Germ, Mystical Space Typhoon, and Pot of Greed. I think the choice here is pretty clear. We're just going to send back the Pot of Greed, as that can be any two other cards. So, you know, best to deprive them of the +1. And we can play around the Mystical Space Typhoon, Dark Hole, and Germ and Bug a bit better than Pot of Greed. So we're going to send that back. They're going to shuffle up the deck a bit. And we're going to set a Sangan, set a Magic Jammer, set a Mirror Force, pass back to them. We figure setting the Sangan is a safe play if they do just want to blind Dark Hole. And also it's not that bad against like Man-Eater Bug and the like. They're going to set one, set another, pass back to us. We draw Woboku, which is pretty good. We're going to actually set this Man-Eater Bug here, daring them to activate Dark Hole. They're going to just pass back to us, so it looks like we get a little bit rewarded for this. We're going to flip up the Man-Eater Bug, pop that Mystic Tomato, flip up Sangan, and just attack in for 1450 here. Again, the deck's main win condition isn't through burn, but if we can potentially kill our opponent through dealing their life points, then we'll try and go that way. They're going to bring out a Giant Soldier of Stone and try and attack in to this Man-Eater Bug here. We're just going to activate Mirror Force, get that 1-for-1 removal there. They're going to set another pass back to us. We draw Giant Trunade, which isn't the best right here, but we'll just switch the Man-Eater to defense, attack in with the Sangan. Main 2, we'll just set another Man-Eater Bug, set the Woboku, pass back to them. You might be wondering why we're playing into Dark Hole, but we've got a Magic Jammer to deal with that Dark Hole. And we know that by setting this additional card here, that will likely bait out the Mystical Space Typhoon, and indeed it does. So the Woboku will be gone here. They're going to bring out a Giant Germ, and it looks like they're just going to opt to attack into the Sangan and clear our board this way, as this will let them get out 2 more Giant Germs and attack into our sets. We will search here for a Cyberjar, which is pretty good, and they're going to try attacking into our bugs. So they'll clear one, and with the other, that will pop their Cyberjar, or not Cyberjar, pop their Giant Germ there, and we draw for turn. We draw a Hero's Shadow Scout, which is very nice, so we'll just set that, pass back to them. And, you know, they know that we have Cyberjar, so they're not going to commit another monster to board, and luckily for us, they do trigger the Hero's Shadow Scout. They send a Forceful Sentry, which won't go to their hand, which is nice, but Cannon Soldier and Man-Eater Bug are a little bit of a problem here. If they set the Man-Eater Bug, they can potentially pop our Cyberjar, which is a bit unfortunate. So they're going to set that, set another, pass back to us. And unfortunately, we can't commit the Cyberjar to board just in case it is a Man-Eater Bug. Luckily, we're pretty much at full life points here. So, you know, we can just set this Spear Cretin as bait and just let them attack in. Oh, that's a big attacker there with the Mechanical Chaser. So this is a little bit worrying now. But Morphing Jar is a pretty good draw for later. We're going to set the Cyberjar, and they're going to try Dark Holing. We've got the Magic Jammer. We'll discard the Magician of Faith, which maybe was a little bit of a mistake. But I think, honestly, it's the best card to discard in our hand, as, you know, we don't have too many good spells. We just have a Forceful Sentry, and Morphing Jar and Giant Grenade are incredibly good here. So they're going to bring out the Cannon Soldier, figuring that it is indeed a Cyberjar, and they are correct. So they're going to tribute off the remainder of their board, except for the Mechanical Chaser, drop us down to 2,700. And it is a Cyber Jar, so we'll be able to banish 5 off the top of both of our decks. And this is an insanely good set of cards off our opponent. 3 of the Power 5 limited spells, Magician of Faith and Witch of the Black Forest. We draw a Change of Heart of our own, which is very nice. And we also get Spear Cretin and Sandgam, which if they survive is pretty good, I think. We don't really need the Trunade, and the Waboku is nice, at least for stemming damage. But this is a very rough Cyber Jar here. We will just set the Spear Cretin and Sandgam here. And add the Trunade, Change of Heart, and Waboku back to hand. They're likely going to set both the Witch and the Magician here. As if they had summoned out the Witch and set the Magician, we'd be able to Change of Heart the Magician very easily. They're going to add the 3 power spells there to hand. Main 2, they're going to Change of Heart, trying to hit like our Spear Cretin, I guess, because then they can potentially snipe it with the Cannon Soldier here. So they're going to bring back the Cannon Soldier, and they will indeed tribute off that Spear Cretin. And they're going to tribute off their 2 other monsters as well. I guess they don't really care about getting the spell back from grave. They just care about depriving us of life points, which I think makes a lot of sense here, as we're in a pretty tough spot, given that they've got the Raigeki in hand for next turn. Luckily, we draw the best card we could have drawn here. This is an incredibly good draw on our part. We're going to activate the Giant Trunade, set our entire hand basically, and go for the card destruction here. So this will discard away a pretty big hand on their part with some very powerful cards and draw them 7 cards. We're going to Change of Heart here, switch the Cannon Soldier to attack, flip up the Sandgam, attack in for 2,400 here. And main 2, we'll just tribute off both those monsters to deal an additional 1,000 and get a search here. So we'll search out a Magician of Faith. We've got Waboku in case they go for an aggressive push here. But honestly, we're feeling good about this. You know, if we discard Magician of Faith with the Morphing Jar, that's unfortunate, of course, but not the worst thing in the world. They're going to try sniping one of our back row with a Mystical Space Typhoon. It is Waboku, so we'll be able to chain it. They've got a Confiscation to snipe that Magician of Faith there. And they're just going to set 3 and pass back to us. We're going to set Waboku, and this is a very dumb play as we were planning on Giant Trunading anyways. So we should have just kept the Waboku in hand, Giant Trunade, set the Waboku, then flipped up the Morphing Jar. But they Solemn Judgment that anyways, so it doesn't matter. We're going to flip up the Morphing Jar anyways, as given that they're at such low life points, we could just win through damage here anyways, and it looks like we might. We've got a Raigeki, and that will just be the end of the game. So we did win through damage there, but honestly, given that they were down to 5 cards in deck, I think that we could have easily won through mill there as well if we chose to go that route instead. But I hope that game showed how powerful the mill deck can be against a good stuff aggro deck when the good stuff aggro deck is not sided into something like Burn. As I do think that mill is very much favored in the matchup, as it's just such a degenerate deck. But, you know, game 2, they are likely going to side into Burn. And, you know, I know that they're going to side into Burn, but I kind of want to simulate what a game would be like if I didn't know this. So I'm actually going to, again, side into like the Solemns like I did in the first match that we played here, figuring that, you know, even if we lose this one in game 3, we can side into Spell and Trap removal just like we did in the last match here. So we're likely not going to win the second game as they are on Burn, and we're not prepared for that really. But hopefully we can still put up a good showing here. They're going to set 2, pass back to us. And we're going to just set a Man-Eater Bug, set a Solemn Judgment, pass back to them. We don't really want to commit too much to board here, as if they do have a Heavy Storm, we don't want to be forced to activate the Solemn Judgment early. They're going to flip up a Man-Eater Bug of their own, popping our Man-Eater Bug, and attacking in for 1450 here. So that's quite unfortunate, getting aggressive early on. And we are just going to set this Magician of Faith, set a Swords of Revealing Light, pass back to them. We figure that if they've got like a Heavy Storm or something, or a Mystical Space Typhoon to clear the Swords of Revealing Light, we'll just be able to get it back with the Magician here. So we feel pretty fine about this. They do indeed have the Heavy Storm, and unfortunately for us, they do have a Tribute to the Doomed as well, so we'll be able to get in for 1450 yet again, and we won't be able to recur that Swords there. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. And we could Raigeki their board away, but that seems pretty bad here. So we're just going to set the Spear Cretin. They don't have any monsters in graveyard, except for this Princess of Tsurugi, which isn't really good here, given that we don't have any back row. So we feel fine about this, and unfortunately they do have a Raigeki, so they'll be able to clear that Spear Cretin, attack in for 2450, which is very unfortunate here. They're going to pass back to us. We draw Change of Heart, which isn't the best here, so we will just Raigeki their board away. They're going to grab a Witch, which is pretty good for them. We're going to set a Magician of Faith here, pass back to them. We don't want to commit the Change of Heart to board, as, if they've got a spell and trap removal, we don't want to lose it, as it is incredibly strong here. They're going to summon out the Witch, set one, attack in to the Magician of Faith. And we're just going to grab back the sword. We could grab back Raigeki, but that's not really the best here, as it just lets them replace the Witch with another monster. So we want to bide our time a little bit here. So we're going to activate swords. That's fine by them. We're going to set this Sangan, pass back to us. Pass back to them, not to us. They're going to activate Chain Energy, which is very unfortunate here, especially given that we're at 2650 life points. So this is very rough. We're going to actually set this Man-Eater Bug here, pass back to them. They're going to pass back to us, as Sword still is up. And we're going to pay 500 to commit this Witch to board. Flip up the Sangan, flip up Man-Eater Bug, and try and get in for a ton of damage here. They're going to grab a Witch to hand, and we're just going to attack in for a ton, just trying to deplete them down, as Chain Energy is a bit of a double-edged sword, so if we can sort of get to them through damage, I think that's best, especially given that they've probably sided in Menard, so our mill strategy is kind of dead in the water now. They're going to pay 1,000 to set 2, pass back to us. We draw Magic Jammer, which isn't the best here. We're going to pay 5 to activate Change of Heart and flip up this Witch. We figure that, given that they set another card, it's likely that it is like a Mirror Force here. So we are going to attack in with everything. This does play into the Mirror Force a little bit, but we have switched our Man-Eater Bug to defense just in case. And unfortunately, it is indeed the Mirror Force. So we'll be able to get a search here. They will also be able to get a search here. They're going to search out Cannon Soldier, which is really rough for us. We're going to search out a Cyberjar and a Witch here. Main 2, we are going to take the risk and set the Cyberjar here. They can drop us down to 150 off of the Cannon Soldier, but that's a risk we'll have to take. And they're going to activate Forceful Sentry here, sending back our Witch of the Black Forest. I think they're probably checking just to make sure that we did indeed set the Cyberjar. And they are going to go for a very interesting play here. They're going to summon out the Minar, and they're going to attack into our Cyberjar. It looks like they don't want to lose the Cannon Soldier. They probably want to save it for when they've got an additional monster on board just to kill us out of nowhere here. And they will take 50 from that attack, and the Cyberjar will pop everything on board and banish 5. Oh, that's a very good banish set on our part, because this commits a lot of monsters to board in a way that dodges around Chain Energy here. So that's very nice on our part. They did get 2 Solemns, a Pot, and a Tribute to the Doomed, which is pretty decent. They also got a Magician of Faith, but if they're not able to clear our Man-Eater Bug here, then the Magician of Faith will likely be not long for this world. But we feel very good about this banish. This is probably the best sort of banish we could have gotten, just getting a ton of monsters to potentially press the offensive here. So we're going to set all those monsters to field in a way that they don't know about, and our opponent is going to add their spells and traps to hand here. So we're just going to set everything there. Add the Magic Jammer to hand. That's a bit less useful here, as we don't really want to commit it to board. They're going to Pot of Greed, draw 2, hope to get something good. And if they draw like Just Desserts, then we just lose here. But unfortunately, it looks like it didn't go as planned for them. So they're just going to activate Tribute and try and hit our Man-Eater Bug. They are going to hit our Witch of the Black Forest, though, which is very good for us. We'll grab a Sangan. I mean, we don't really necessarily want to use this, as we'd prefer to sort of flip up our Magician of Faith to get back something like, Raigeki or Change of Heart, which can kill their Magician of Faith in case the Man-Eater Bug gets Solemn Judgmented here. But we're still feeling okay about this. They set 4 back row, so it looks like they're going all in here. And they're going to pass back to us. So we've got to play this turn a bit carefully, keeping in mind the Chain Energy and the 2 Solemn Judgments that they've got. In addition, they may have a 3rd Solemn Judgment as well, which would dispel the end of the game for us. So we've got to play this a bit carefully. We're going to start by flipping the Man-Eater Bug. This will likely bait a Solemn, but we're fine with that. This drops them down below 450, which means that, they won't be able to activate anything from hand with the Chain Energy there. So hopefully we'll be able to do something good here. We're going to flip up the Magician of Faith, and that is ultimately fine by them. So we'll grab a Raigeki to hand, and we're just going to pay 500 to activate that Raigeki. They're going to Solemn Judgment that. And now we're just going to try to attack over their set monster. Unfortunately, they do have one more Solemn Judgment here. And so that will just be the end of what we can do. We're not going to attack into their monster, as we know it's a Magician of Faith with 400 defense. Luckily for us, though, we're a bit of a stalemate here, unless that set card is like a True Nade or a Mystical Space Typhoon. But given that they're passing back to us, it looks like it probably isn't, and it indeed isn't. It's just a 7 Tools of the Bandit. So, we can just bide our time here. They're lower on cards in deck. Neither of us can really attack in to kill the other with monsters on field. So we're just at a stasis point. Neither of us can actually win the game here through being proactive. And it looks like they see the writing on the wall. So that will just be the end of the game. So, we didn't really side the best against the burn smokescreen side in these matchups. But, given that the Good Stuff aggro deck is not a dedicated burn deck from the start, I think this shows that the mill deck can actually beat the sort of sided into burn strategy, even if it's not the most prepared for it. I mean, in the second games of both of our matches that I've shown off today, we actually did manage to eke out a win here. I think in general it is better to side in spell and trap removal. You should probably assume that your opponent's going to go into the smokescreen burn side deck strategy, as it's just very powerful against mill. So you should probably not side in the Solemns, side in things like, Mystical Space Typhoons, Heavy Storms, etc. But I think even if you don't do that, the mill deck can manage to win here. And as game 1 of this match shows, the mill deck can win pretty handily in game 1 in general. Of course, game 1 of the previous match shows that it's not always certain, as there is a lot of variance depending on what you draw and what your opponent draws early on, and if they're able to get a major aggressive push early on in the game. But I think in general, the mill versus Good Stuff matchup should be in mill's favor. But what do you think about this matchup? Do you think that I'm very wrong about this, and that, the first game that I showed off sort of proves that mill is not as good as I've been talking it up to be? Or do you think that the first game was just a fluke and that I'm correct and mill should be curb stomping this sort of Good Stuff aggro deck 9 times out of 10? Let me know down in the comments below. And until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.